Ellis B. Feaster's Radio Aircheck and Classic TV channel.
100 years as the voice of New York.
Hiya, it's Joey Reynolds.
I'm Barry Farber.
I'm Ralph Snodsmith.
Another episode of McCann's Place.
This is Martin Block.
I'm Sally Jesse Raphael.
This is 710 WOR.
An iHeart radio station.
Joe Bartlett on 710 WOR, an NBC News radio station.
Celebrating 710 WOR's 100 years as the voice of New York.
Hey, we've been here longer than Patsy's Restaurant.
Here's Mark Simone.
Well, we got lots to get to today. We'll get to the Ukraine, the latest. We'll get to the background, what the hell went wrong here, what happened. We'll get to, throughout the program, we'll be talking about the 100th birthday, the 100th anniversary of WOR. It began 100 years ago today. It was the very first talk radio station. Talk radio was invented here at WOR. And Joe Bartlett, what did you do when you first came here, your first job?
I was a reporter. I came down from Albany, New York, where prior to that I covered the Capitol for WOR starting in 1980. I got hired full-time 86 as a reporter. Street reporter.
Wow. You know, back in those days, if you went into a radio station newsroom, there were 50 guys, reporters with equipment running out into the field. There were 1,000 people at desks. There were teletypes clicking away. You don't need that anymore. It's all digital now. you just don't need it anymore. What did you do what did you take into the field? You took probably a big tape recorder, like a big metal tape recorder?
Yeah, a briefcase with a tape recorder. Yeah, and at that point, it was kind of a crude system. In order to feed your audio back, you had to unscrew a phone and hook it up to wires. It was kind of crazy.
If you kids today took a time machine back to the 80s, you wouldn't believe what the hell we had to do. This guy had to go into a phone booth and unscrew the mouthpiece and stick alligator clips into two metal things and try to feed his stuff.
We didn't have cell phones when I first started. You know, eventually they came around, but when they were cell phones, they were a size of a suitcase. You know, the big. I'm sure you know them, right? They had a big, huge battery that was attached to them. You had to lug those things around. Yeah,
or the Gordon Gekko version, on Wall Street, where he's talking on the beach in that big walkie-talkie-like thing. I'm trying to remember, in the late 80s and 90s, how did we do a radio show? We didn't have any computers. I mean, I guess in the newsroom they had these big books, like the World Almanac.
Yeah, maps.
The sports. We had to look up stuff in books.
Yeah.
I don't know how we did anything back then. So, but that was WOR 1922. You realize who the guests have been on WOR over the last 100 years?
Sure.
Einstein was a guest here.
Oh, my God.
Albert Einstein was on.
Who interviewed him?
WOR.
Serving New York longer than the Holland Tunnel.
100 years as the voice of New York. This is 710 WOR. The celebration continues with the Mark Simone Show.
Well, we'll take some calls. 800-321-0710. It's the 100th birthday today of WOR. In every city there's like one legendary station that was like the station of the city, like in Chicago, WGN, or WBZ in Boston, or WJR in Detroit. It's like one station was the station, and in New York it was WOR. These stations, all getting close to 100 years old. We're 100 today. So throughout the program, we'll look back on. Did you ever work with Bernard Meltzer?
Oh yeah, oh absolutely. He was doing afternoon drive when I first got there. 3 hours in the afternoon.
If you don't remember Bernard Meltzer, this guy was a phenomenon. I mean, an absolute phenomenon. He was supposedly Dr. Bernard Meltzer. I don't think he was really a doctor, but
no, he wasn't. No.
And he would get on the air, and he would talk like a wonderful old grandfather. And the woman would call crying about their son is on drugs, and he would say, "Mama, listen to me."
Mama.
And he could give you advice on dealing with this drug addiction. The next call would be about the grout on my tile in my bathroom is wearing away. Listen to me. And he would give you this advice. It was amazing. And you pictured this brilliant professor, and then you'd see the guy in real life. He was like a disheveled, broken down, weird looking guy. Am I wrong?
No. He in his older years, he had difficulty getting to the men's room and back. Commercial break.
Yes.
I would be doing the news. I'd be finishing up the news, and I could see him shuffling down the hall. So they had a long intro for him. Let there be peace on earth. Let there be. So it would go on and on and on because Bernie didn't get back from the bathroom.
Yes, and in later years, I was at the NBC radio network. He came over there to do a show, and they were beautiful plush studios. And after he left, we would find sometimes a bottle in the studio that he had filled up.
Yeah, right, I know.
You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
Over there, the men's room was quite a ways away. So, So.
No, but he was phenomenal. Everybody trusted him, no matter what the question was. They called Dr. Meltzer and Bernadette, give her a T-shirt.
Yeah, I think he was up for like an hour a day. It was so big that it was 2 hours. Then it was like every day. Then it was 7 nights. Then it was 5 hours. There was nobody big. He was making millions. This guy got millions of dollars a year to do this show. And you're right. Every caller, whatever your problem, he'd say, he was so sympathetic to your problem that he would say, hang on, I'm going to give you 2 T-shirts. Oh, thank you, Dr. Meltzer. Hang on. And what he would do is get your name and address and then sell it to whoever you needed. Like, if it was a hardware problem, he'd sell it to a hardware store.
That's before social media tracking. But he, oh gosh, I forgot what I was going to say. But he, now I'm sorry,
2 T-shirts. He was on like towards the end. I know what I was on. Like
he would. They still broadcast him after he died. That's how big he was.
Oh yeah. That's how big he was.
He's dead. He's still broadcasting.
That's how big this guy was. He died, and they didn't care. They kept running the shows. In fact, it was better because they didn't have to clean up the studio after this guy. You're right. He was dead, and they kept running the show. And the listeners were still listening. They didn't care that he was dead. So, who else am I forgetting back then? What happened when he? Yeah. But there were all these legendary characters here. You know, Joan Rivers was on in Dr. Meltzer's time period afterwards. Joan Rivers did a show.
WOR listeners. Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
No, I couldn't hear anything you said.
I didn't say anything.
Oh.
I was listening. I was letting you tell me nice things. Thank you for calling. I have a cousin, Charlotte, who I see once every 35 years. So I'm going to take out of order my cousin, Charlotte.
Hello, Joan.
I think it's so good to have a family chat.
Isn't it great? Why are you hysterical? Just because your family loves you?
Because it's nice to do family chit-chat on the network's time.
You know, one of the things that happens is when they're looking for a host, sometimes they'll hire somebody from another place, like a comedian or, like a TV host, a comedian from, I think, she's a great stand-up comedian, she'll be so funny on the radio. And they don't realize she's not really cut out to do it. It was hard for her to come up with the right content. So you end up talking to Cousin Sarah for 5 minutes. So
I got the Joan Rivers story. She had they did a remote at a mattress store. Yeah. And she said, welcome to, and she gave the wrong mattress store name. She thought she was at a different store.
Don't tell me that's the story.
Yeah, sorry. I thought it was bigger than that, but okay. But, yeah.
All right. Well, if you ever speak in front of 10,000 people, don't close with that story.
Yeah, okay. Another 100 years, we'll get it better.
Yeah, no, but that's part of the problem when you're not a radio host. You know, you don't realize. You're right. The store is paying for this broadcast. Yeah. That's the most important thing, is get it right, and she forgot that part. Anyway, let's take some calls. Let's go to Gloria in Long Island. Gloria, how you doing?
Hi, good morning.
Yes, Gloria.
I was just thinking about when my husband and I used to listen to WOR in the evening, and there was a couple on called the Fitzgeralds, and they were ancient, I think.
What was it, Pegeen and Ed Fitzgerald, right?
Yep. We used to call him Lord Edward. And they
this was an example of the humor that these two had come up with. They'd call him Lord Edward. These people were huge, millions of listeners. They're getting $3 million a year to do this. If you put this show on now, everybody would go, "What the hell is this?" They're just mumbling about nothing. But back then, it was a different world.
100 years as the voice of New York.
From its first transmission in 1922, some of the greatest names in broadcasting have entertained and reported on WOR.
This is 710 WOR.
An iHeart radio station.
It's the 100th anniversary of 710 WR, 100 years old today. Hey, there's all these guys that were here that you forgot about. Do you remember Henry Morgan?
No. Henry Morgan.
See, that's
Not
the problem.
guy from MASH.
No, that's Harry Morgan.
Harry Morgan.
Nash, Colonel Potter.
Yeah.
But there were guys like Henry Morgan. He was like the Howard Stern of the early 50s. He was like the shock jock. He was on TV. He was sort of a comedian, commentator. He was just a guy who'd come out, and he was brilliant, but he'd be a little outrageous. And he was, but they all made a lot of money because they would be they had game shows that were on in prime time, like What's My Line and I've Got a Secret, and Henry Morgan was a panelist there. But he did these brilliant commentaries, and he was on WOR for years, and he had this very serious voice, but he was quite funny and witty. And
Good evening, anybody. Here's Morgan. A number of well-wishers have come to me to tell me that there are a couple of other kids around on the air who are doing this same sort of work. My two friends tell me that I have imitators who steal my stuff. Well, I'll tell you, nobody can steal Morgan's stuff on account of it's already been stolen. You want to steal from me? He who steals my program steals trash. And the only thing you got that I ain't got...
Okay, that's not a great example, but that's very early. His voice was a little higher, then it got deeper later. He was very funny. Not a nice guy in real life, again. He was never nice. Hey, I got to work with him a couple times. Never nice to me. He wouldn't even talk to me. You know, Steve Allen and I used to do a daily radio show together every day. We co-hosted a show, 3 hours every day, on the NBC radio network. Whenever Henry Morgan was a guest, Steve would talk, and then when I would ask a question, he'd say, "I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to him." Right on the air. Wow. He was that kind of guy, but I love this guy, Henry Morgan. But there were a lot of these guys, Bob and Ray. They were on every afternoon. Bob and Ray were two of the greatest, most important figures in the history of American comedy, and they did the afternoon show for years on WOR. Anyway, well, if you want to talk about WOR, call me. 800-321-0710 is the number. Check out the webpage. A lot of good stuff up there today. Probably the two most important stations in radio history, WNEW and WOR, these two AM giants. OR invented the talk radio show and talk radio, pioneered everything. And then it was WNEW that invented the disc jockey and playing music. They were not the talk station. And Joe Bartlett, do you know how that started? It was 1934, I think. And there was a guy named Martin Block, and he had to cover the Lindbergh hearings. Yeah. And sometimes during the trial, they'd take a break for an hour and a half, and he couldn't fill an hour and a half by just talking. So he'd play phonograph records. Oh. And even when the trial ended, it became very popular for this guy to play these phonograph records, popular records that were out. So the record companies went to court to sue him, to make him stop, because if he plays them for free on the radio, nobody's going to buy them. So
yeah, interesting, yeah.
The suit is dragging on, and as it's dragging on, the record companies know, wait a minute, every time he plays a record, the opposite happens. It sells like crazy. People go out and buy it. So they dropped the lawsuit, and this guy, Martin Block, kept playing records, and it was the biggest columnist ever, Walter Winchell, gave him a title as a joke. He called him a disc jockey, because he was living off these records. So,
hey, pretty cool. I like that. Good story.
Yeah. So, and it was WNEW, they had this crazy idea. At the top of each hour, they would do a 5-minute newscast. I think the Daily News sponsored, so that was where that was invented. But the big stuff was invented at WOR, the talk show, talk radio. The big giants came out of here, and it was quite the grand radio station. Like when you first started to work here at WOR, when you came in, everybody was wearing a suit and tie, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, we were owned by RKO at the time, and big money. People got paid a lot of money, big expense accounts, whatever you needed. You need to make a trip? Okay, go ahead, take it.
Yeah, and but you'd come in and John, which gambling was that? John B. gambling.
John
right?
John A.
I can never keep this straight. John A. was the middle gambling.
Yeah.
And he had a suit and tie on when he came to work to do the morning show, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but we had a tie on, too.
Yeah, but on the other hand, that was everything back then. It's the same in every other business. You go to the bank now, nobody's wearing a tie anymore. In fact, now, if I come into the building wearing a suit and tie, they think I'm the security guard. So that's the only person wearing a tie anymore anywhere. But it was this was quite the place. It was amazing, and it keeps going. And then who hired you here? Was it
Bernie Gershon. Bernie Gershon was the news director, and John McConnell was managing editor.
Yeah, and then
John A. Gambling actually had a lot to do with it too, because he owned the radio station that I worked at up in Albany.
Oh, okay. So he got to know you, recommended you, and yeah. Now I came over here. It was 2013. It was iHeart at that time bought WOR and brought us all over. Remember, it was all at once. Like me, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity.
I remember that. It was like an invasion.
Yeah, what did you think when we all came over?
I said, oh my God, ABC is coming here.
Yeah, WABC had been the big number one talk, but then we all came over here and made WOR the big station. So, yeah, it was pretty, it must have been traumatic because you guys, you never know when new owners come in, what's going to happen.
I went through 3 ownership changes here.
Yeah, it was RKO, and then it was Buckley, right?
Buckley, yeah. Yeah, and then Clear Channel, iHeart.
Yeah, and I always heard about iHeart because when we worked for Disney and ABC, I kept hearing this evil iHeart, this evil Clear Channel.
Yeah, I know.
It's the most evil. They're so evil. You heard that too, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Most evil. Then I get over here. It's the nicest company you could ever work for. Everybody's great here. The finest management. The most. Everything is great. I've never worked for a better owner than iHeart, so don't believe that's just what happens it's the same thing with iHeart. Is like Tom Brady. When you're number one and the best and nobody's even close, everybody hates you. It's like the Yankees, the Mets fans hate the Yankees. Guys like you can't stop bad-mouthing Brady, right? Because he's so great.
100 years as the voice of New York.
Fulton Lewis Jr. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
John Wingate reporting.
This is Lyle Vine.
I'm Shelley Strickler reporting.
Good morning, I'm Lou Adler.
I'm Joe Bartlett. I'm 710 WOR.
This is 710 WOR.
An iHeart radio station.